Yeah, this is Dr. Sheetal Kulgod. I'm a practicing consultant obstetrician and gynecologist. I'm working at Tattvadarshi Hospital in Hubli. I've been a teacher in KIMS. I've worked as assistant professor almost for 7 years, and then I quit my job once I started my practice. But this is a great opportunity for me to get back into academics and teaching the students and getting in touch with students. And I would thank Dr. Umesh Bilgi to giving me this opportunity and platform. It's a new experience for me as well, and never been on online teaching. It's something new. Although I've seen my kids using online portal for classrooms, now that because of the lockdown, everything of their classes are on the web. So we'll begin, and hopefully it will be a great way to kind of start and continue further. Since you all belong to a varied stream of the MBBS, few are in second final year, and then few are in the internship courses and all. And then there was a feedback from my other colleagues, Dr. Sanghi's classes and Bilgi's classes and Dr. Ramya as well, that you would wish to have a brief talk about the theory first, and then you would want to attend to the MCQs based on the same topic. So that's how I've prepared the class. I'm really not sure what is the time structure and all that, but whenever you wish to kind of want me to stop and then continue to the next class, please let me know. We can always do that. As of today's topic, I have started with the anatomy, the basic, and here I'll be briefing about the anatomy relevant to the MCQs which have been asked in the previous year's questions and previous year's exams. So what I've done is taken those important points in the form of notes, and then I will be presenting to you those things. And since anatomy here is factual in the sense that there is not much of a concept based learning in anatomy, there are things which are there, and of course, you need to know that the particular structure is there, you need to know its relations, you need to know its blood supply, lymphatics, and everything, and it's all factual. And only important thing is you need to try to find out the methods by which you can remember those facts, and then you don't confuse amongst other things. So that's what is more important in the anatomy. Anything else from your end, students, before I start with the presentation?
No, ma'am, you can start.
Yes, Roshan, I can hear you. So we'll go ahead with the presentation and hoping to see other people join in over the course, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So we begin with anatomy. Initially, we'll start with the external genital organs. Now, the external genital organs as a whole, you can call it as vulva as well. And the parts, different parts constituted are mons pubis or the mons veneris. Yeah, so the pen is working now. This is the mons veneris. Then you have the two labia majora on either side. Their inner side is hairless. The labia majora, the inner side is hairless, whereas the outer side you can see the hair there. The labia majora is homologous to the scrotum in a male. The round ligament terminates at its anterior third. That is the anterior third. You can see the round ligament terminating inner side. It contains the hair follicles, the sebaceous glands, as well as modified sweat glands, which are also called as apocrine glands. Now, sometimes the hydrodenoma of vulva arises from the apocrine glands of the labia majora as well as the mons veneris. The next structure is the labia minora. You can see here it's a pinkish-like structure. It has two folds again on either side. It is homologous to the ventral aspect of the penis in the male. This next structure, important structure, is a clitoris. You can see here on the superior aspect of the labia minora. It is homologous to the penis in the male. The posterior part of the vestibule between the fourchette and the vaginal opening. That is, this is the fourchette here. This is the vaginal opening, the introitus, what you can see. This particular portion that is in between the vaginal opening and the fourchette, this is called as the fossa navicularis.
Video is not seen.
Sorry?
Video is not visible, ma'am. what are you presenting? I mean pictures or?
The presentation, are you not seeing the PPT?
It is
No,
visible.
ma'am.
Please
It is
check
visible.
your
Video is
settings.
visible.
There is two option. Please click
Just
the
click
another
on
option.
Yes?
video is visible.
Okay, the
Video
PPT
is
is
Okay.
visible,
visible.
right?
You must click some other option.
The PPT is visible,
It is
right?
visible.
Okay. So can
Yeah,
you
it
please
is
check your
visible.
settings?
PPT is visible.
So
Okay,
should
ma'am.
I
You
go
carry
ahead?
on. Carry on.
Yeah, I'll
You
carry
carry
on.
on, ma'am, please.
Right. So vestibule is another name given to this is a particular structure, it's a triangular space actually, which is bounded anteriorly by the clitoris, posteriorly by the foreshead, and either side by the labia minora. So this particular structure is called as vestibule. The most important thing what you have to remember in the vestibule is the number of openings which are there in the vestibule. So there are four glands, or there are four openings in the vestibule. The first one is the urethral opening, that is the urethral meatus. Then you have the vaginal orifice or the vaginal opening. On either side of the urethral opening, you have two paraurethral glands, which are also called as the Skene's glands. Okay, and then you have the Bartholin's duct opening on either side of the labia minora and the hymen. So this is an important point to remember. In the vestibule, there is a question where they have asked the number of openings in the vestibule, where it's actually 6. So the urethra, vagina, 2 Skene glands openings and 2 Bartholin's glands opening form totally 6 openings in the vestibule. Now, what is important in the vulva you have to remember the embryologically is point-wise. Clitoris develops from genital tubercle, labia minora develops from genital folds, labia majora from the genital or the labioscrotal swellings, vestibule from the urogenital sinus. Blood supply is by mainly the internal pudendal artery, and the sensory innervation is mainly by the pudendal nerve. The lymphatic drainage is very important in the vulva. What you have to remember here is mainly it is into the inguinal nodes. So first it drains into the superficial inguinal lymph nodes, that is also called as the sentinel lymph node, and then to the deep inguinal lymph nodes. Now, one thing what you have to remember here is you have to categorize the lymphatic drainage by dividing this into two parts, that is in the midline if you divide, and any structure which is lying within 2 centimeters of this midline, what happens is in this area, the lymphatic drainage, there is uh, crossing over of the lymphatics in this area, from this area to this area. So the structures which fall in the midline or 2 centimeters away from the midline, such as the clitoris, foreshead, and the anterior labia minora, whenever there is a lesion or a cancer in these structures, because of the crisscrossing of the lymphatic drainage in these area, whenever there is a cancerous lesion, and whenever there is a surgeries happening for the cancer treatment, the surgeon has to address the lymph nodes bilaterally, in the sense the inguinal lymph nodes as well as the femoral lymph nodes on both the sides have to be addressed if there is a lesion in the midline or 2 centimeters away from the midline. Whereas the structures which are away from the midline, more than 2 centimeters away from the midline, here the lymphatics do not cross over each other. And therefore, whenever there is any lesion in this part of the vulva that is away from the 2 centimeters from the midline, then we need not address both the sides the lymph nodes. Only that particular unilaterally the lymph nodes can be addressed, and the dissection of only one side of the lymph nodes can be done in case of any cancerous lesions of those structures. Clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Right. Now, coming to the hymen, this is again an important structure which forms the, which is lying at the introitus, and it is usually kind of tone at the time of consummation of the marriage or the sex. So it is a thin fold of mucous membrane, and it is attached to the vaginal orifice all around. It is lined by, this is an important point, lined by stratified squamous epithelium on both the sides. The both the sides means towards the vaginal opening as well as the external opening. Now it is the most commonly told posterolaterally. That means on this side posterolaterally, this is the most common area where it is torn, or posteriorly. Now it is replaced by tags after childbirth called carunculi myrtiformes. You can see here there are different types of hymen. This is the imperforate hymen. Normally the hymen has an annular opening. When there is no opening in the hymen, we call it as imperforate hymen. It's a congenital abnormality, what we call it as imperforate hymen, where there is no opening in the hymen at all. Then you have different types of openings, and based on that, the hymen types. That one is annular hymen, where the opening is round in shape. Then you have septate hymen, where there is a small septa in between the two. You have the cribriform, where there is hymen. There are multiple openings in the hymen. This is called as cribriform hymen. And then you have the parus introitus hymen, where the hymen is torn, and then it is represented by small tags, what you can see at the edges. These are called as carunculi myrtiforms. Now the lymphatic drainage, as I told, the vulva, first is the superficial inguinal lymph nodes, which is the sentinel lymph node. Then it goes to the deep inguinal or the femoral group of lymph nodes. That's why in vulval cancer, we address the inguinofemoral lymph node dissection is done. Is it clear about the vulva, the external genitalia? I've touched
Yes,
upon
ma'am.
just the important points. Any doubt in that particular section?
No, ma'am.
Right. So we proceed towards the internal genital organs, which are mainly formed by the vagina, the uterus, fallopian tubes, and the ovaries. Right. Now, vagina is a distensible fibromuscular canal. It connects the uterine cavity with the exterior or at the vulva. Now, the anterior wall of the vagina is smaller than the posterior wall of the vagina. That is 7.5 centimeters is the anterior wall, 9 centimeters is the posterior wall. So, therefore, there is a difference of 2.5 to 3 centimeters between the anterior and the posterior wall. That is, the posterior wall will be 2.5 to 3 centimeters longer than the anterior wall. The upper vagina is separated by the cervix into anterior, posterior, and lateral fornices. So the deepest fornix, because the posterior wall is longer, it will be the posterior fornix, and shallowest will be the anterior fornix. On cut section, here you can see the vagina and its relations. On cut section, that is, if you take a by a edge-shaped cavity, okay, because there is approximation of the anterior and the posterior wall of the vagina are approximated to each other, and therefore when you take a cut section, the cavity of the vagina will be appearing as an edge-shaped. Now, relations of the vagina is again very important. Anteriorly, the vagina is related to the bladder in its upper 2/3 here. Yeah, here it's yeah. Can you see now? Anteriorly, it is bounded by the bladder in the upper 2/3, and then the lower 2/3 it's the urethra. Posteriorly, it is bounded by the pouch of Douglas in the upper 1/3, ampulla of the rectum in the middle third, and the perineal body in the lower third. This is the perineal body. So these are the relations of the vagina. Laterally, you can see here the vagina is bounded by the levatorinae muscle, the Mackenroth's ligament of the pelvic cellular tissue, then the bulbocavernosus muscle, the vestibular bulb, and the Bartholin's glands. So from about onwards, the cervix and all fornices are related to the uterine vessels. You can see the ureter, the uterine vessel, Mackenroth's ligament, and these are the three important structures which are laterally related to the vagina. The vagina, another important thing what you have to remember is it is inhabited by commensals, what we call the bacteria, which is also called as Dodeline's bacteria. They are mainly lactobacilli. They are the lactobacilli variety of bacteria. The important thing here is the Dodeline's bacilli or the lactobacilli convert the glycogen, which is present in the vaginal epithelial cells, into lactic acid. This occurs under the influence of the hormone estrogen. So that's why, because of the production of the lactic acid, the pH of the vagina is most of the times acidic. The pH of the vagina in the adult woman is between 4 to 5.5, and the average is 4.5. Now, the pH of the vagina varies with the age. This is because the level of the estrogen secretion also varies with the age. That's why under the influence of the estrogen and the Dodolins bacilli, the vaginal pH also varies. But what you have to remember is in an adult woman of reproductive age with a normal menstrual cycles under the influence of the estrogen, the normal vaginal pH ranges between 4 to 5.5, an average of 4.5. Now, the other things what you have to remember regarding this is Dodolins bacilli are present in a newborn female's vagina, and then they disappear after 10 to 14 days to reappear at puberty. Then again, they disappear after menopause. So this particular phenomenon of the appearance and disappearance of the Dodolin bacilli also will alter the vaginal pH accordingly in these age groups of females, right? Now, apart from Dodolins bacilli, it also contains many other pathogenic organisms, including Clostridium welchii. So this is a table which shows the vaginal pH at different age groups. As I mentioned, in the newborn infant, because of the presence of the Dodolins bacilli, the pH is again acidic, between 4 to 5. In 6 weeks old child, because of the disappearance of the Dodolins bacilli, it changes from acidic to alkaline, that is 6.8. At puberty, again, because of the appearance of the Dodolins bacilli, it changes from alkaline to acidic. And throughout the reproductive age group, it continues to be between 4 to 5.5 pH. In pregnancy, it becomes more acidic, that is 3.5 to 4.5. During menstruation, it is a little on the alkaline side, between 6 to 8. Now, this is because of the admixture of the blood, and blood being an alkaline medium will change the pH to alkaline, towards alkalinity, that is 6 to 8. And at menopause, again, because of the lack of estrogen secretion, what happens is there is no conversion of the glycogen into lactic acid, and therefore the vaginal pH is between 6 to 8. Now, this is important because the vaginal pH or the acidic pH prevents the infection or the vaginitis from the pathogenic organisms. And that's why what you can see is vaginitis or infections of the vagina are more common in children as well as during post-menstruation and in menopausal women, because the alkaline pH and the acidic pH is lost and they are more prone for infections. Clear?
Yes.
Right. Now, another thing what you have to remember is the pH of the vagina also varies along its length. It is being highest in the sense, highest means on the alkaline side in the upper part because of the admixture of the cervical mucus. The cervical mucus secreted from the cervix is a alkaline. That's why at the upper part of the vagina, the pH will be more alkaline. Whereas as you come from above downwards, the pH will be more acidic. Now, another important thing what you have to remember in vagina is the vaginal epithelium is stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, so it does not have any mucus secreting glands. The vaginal epithelium does not have any mucus secreting glands. Whatever the secretions are there in the vagina is all derived from other glands, mainly the endocervical glands, then the endometrial glands, the Bartholin's glands, and also through transfusion or transudation of the fluid across the vaginal epithelium. So these are the main sources of the vaginal secretion. Another important thing to remember is the vagina does not have its own mucus secreting glands. It's only through sourced from other glands as well as through transudation of its across its epithelium. That is what is the source of the vaginal secretion. And the next point to remember here is that the vagina does not have a serosal covering, only except in the cul-de-sac area or the posterior fornix, where it is in attachment. Here you can see in this figure, only in the part where it is in touch with the POD, that is the pouch of Douglas, only in this portion it is having a serosal covering. Otherwise, anywhere else it does not have a serosal covering. There has been one question based on this point too. That's why I've included it in this. Now, as I mentioned, the stratified squamous epithelium is the lining of the vaginal epithelium. There are different types of cells in that: parabasal cells, the basal cells, then you have the intermediate cells and the superficial cells. Now, these cells will be shedded in the vaginal cavity, and depends on the different hormonal status of the female, the predominance of a particular cell will be seen. Now, basal cells are predominantly seen when there is no hormonal dominance. That means there is no much excess of estrogen or excess of progesterone. Whereas intermediate cells are predominant when there is progesterone predominance. That is, progesterone is predominant in which phase of the cycle? In the menstrual cycle? Yes, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, progesterone is predominant in the which phase of the menstrual cycle?
Ma'am, let's search, ma'am.
Sorry? First half of the cycle or second half of the cycle?
First off,
Who said first half?
Ma'am, second app, ma'am.
Yeah. Why second half?
Because LH surge occurs, ma'am, after that.
Yeah. So what happens with the LH surge? Anybody else?
Ma'am, corpus luteum.
Yeah. So LH surge happens. Corpus luteum is formed, and the corpus luteum is the one which is responsible for producing the hormone progesterone in the second half of the cycle. And what you can see under the influence of the progesterone, the intermediate cells in the vaginal epithelium are predominant. Okay. And then you have the superficial cells which are predominant when there is excess of estrogen. So excess of estrogen is seen in the follicular phase of the first half of the menstrual cycle. So these changes in the vaginal epithelium and accordingly the predominance of the cells which are seen in the scrapings or the samplings of the vagina are helpful in hormonal studies. So the sampling of the vagina is done for hormonal studies as well, and depending on the which type of cells are predominant, we can assess the predominance of the hormones. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, another point to note here, which was there again in an MCQ, is that in the newborn females, the vagina is lined by transitional epithelium. Over a period of time, it changes to the stratified squamous epithelium. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
The blood supply of the vagina is from descending vaginal artery, which is a branch of either a uterine artery or a descending branch of the internal iliac artery, by the internal pudendal artery and the middle rectal artery. Lymphatic drainage, upper vagina is same as that of the cervix, which we'll study later. Middle vagina is into internal iliac lymph nodes and lower vagina is into superficial inguinal lymph nodes. Coming to the uterus, the points to remember here is it is a pyriform in shape. The weight of non-pregnant uterus in nulliparous females is 50 to 70 grams. The weight of non-pregnant uterus in multiparous females is 80 grams. Weight of non-pregnant uterus is about 1000 grams. Length of the non-pregnant uterus in nulliparous females is 6 to 8 centimeters. Length of non-pregnant uterus in multiparous females is 9 to 10 centimeters. Length of a pregnant uterus could vary depending on the gestational age, but you can take a term about 35 centimeters. Capacity of non-pregnant uterus is 10 ml. Capacity of pregnant uterus is 5000 ml. Position of the uterus. The most common position is, anybody? Anteversion and
anti-version.
anteflexion. What is anteversion and anteflexion? I'll just brief in the next few slides. Apart from that, the body or the wall of the uterus will have three layers. One is the perimetrium, which is the outer coat. Then you have the myometrium, which is the thick bundle of muscles forming they are arranged in three distinct layers. Even in the myometrium, the muscles are arranged in three different layers. We have the outer longitudinal, inner circular, and middle layer is interlacing. The middle layer is also called as the living ligature. Why is it called so? Because at the time of the delivery, after the delivery of the placenta, what happens is the uterus has to contract and retract. Is it not? So
Yes.
what happens is the middle, the interlacing fibers, which are crisscross in nature, once they contract and retract, retraction is where they do not again re-expand. They do not again, elongate. That is the quality of retraction. So with this kind of contraction and retraction, because of the crisscross nature, they will occlude the blood vessels which are present in the myometrium or the uterine wall, and therefore they prevent the postpartum bleeding or the postpartum hemorrhage. That's why the middle interlacing layer of the myometrium of the uterus is called as the living ligature. Now coming to the endometrium, there's the inner layer, innermost layer of the uterus. It is mucous lining of the cavity. There is no submucous layer. The endometrium is directly attached to the muscle cord. It consists of lamina propria and the surface epithelium. The surface epithelium is a single layer of ciliated columnar epithelium. But what you have to remember is once the menstruation starts, the cilia are lost. So it's only the
Yes.
columnar epithelium later on after puberty. Now we were talking about anteversion and anteflexion. The angle of anteversion is between the cervix and the vagina.
Long
So,
axis of cervix.
sorry?
Long axis of cervix and long axis of vagina.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
Long axis of cervix and long axis of vagina.
Right, sorry. Yes, you're correct. Long axis of the vagina to the long axis of the cervix. This is the anteversion. And normally it's about, you can see it's about 90 degrees,
90.
right? So this is anteversion. Whereas anteflexion is where the long axis of the cervix and the long axis of the uterus or the uterine body. This is usually an obtuse angle that is about 120 to 130 degrees. Okay. Now another thing what you have to remember is the long axis of the vagina. It makes about pen is not working. Yeah. So here you can see the long axis of the vagina. Long axis of the vagina makes about 45 degrees angles with the horizontal plane. Okay, this is one thing you have to remember. And another thing what you have to remember is imagine if there is a pelvis here, the pelvis here, you can see the inlet of the pelvis will be somewhere here like this. So the long axis of the vagina is almost parallel to the long axis of the inlet of the pelvis. So this is another point you have to remember. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
We go to the different parts of the uterus. As you know, the fundus is the part which lies above the opening of the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes. The body proper is triangular and lies between the openings of the tubes of the cornua and the isthmus. Structures attached at the cornua of the uterus from anterior to posterior, that is important again to remember, are you can remember as at RFO, that is round ligament, the round ligament. Then you have the fallopian tube and the ovarian ligament. The round ligament and the ovarian ligament lie inferior to it at the same level. And since there is always a confusion between round ligament and the ovarian ligament or the fallopian tube, this is the most common error which happens at the time of tubectomy. Instead of ligating the fallopian tube, sometimes we ligate the round ligament. So that is the one thing what you have to remember, which is the most common cause of failure of ligation or a failure of tubectomy procedure. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, isthmus is another important part of the uterus. What you have to remember is it's the part of the uterus which is about 0.5 centimeters situated in between the body of the uterus and the cervix. It extends from the anatomical internal os, that is on the superior part, to the histological internal os, that is on the inferior part. So this portion is called as the isthmus. Now, the importance of isthmus is that this is the portion which leads or which forms the lower uterine segment at the time of the pregnancy. After 12 weeks, you can see that this portion that is develops, and it is called as the lower uterine segment. And it is goes on developing throughout the pregnancy, and it is best formed at the term or at the time of the delivery. Now, at the term or the lower uterine segment is formed by the isthmus. That is about 70% of it, and 30% is also contributed by the cervix. So this is the place that is a lower uterine segment, where at the time of the cesarean section, we open the uterus along the lower uterine segment and deliver the baby outside. So how do you identify the lower uterine segment during cesarean section? Is by the loose fold of peritoneum or the vesical fold of peritoneum. Now,
Yes.
in this figure here, you can see how the bladder is related to the lower portion of the uterus, is it not? So here you can see the vesical fold of peritoneum, which goes above the bladder and reflects here onto the uterus. So this portion where the utrovesical fold of peritoneum is lifted up, and that is loosely attached here. Below that portion is the lower uterine segment. So during the cesarean section, we identify this utrovesical fold of peritoneum, we cut it open, push it down, and then access to the lower uterine segment, take an incision here and deliver the baby. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Coming to the cervix, it is the lowermost part of the uterus extending from the histological internal os to the external os. It is cylindrical in shape, measuring 2.5 centimeter length and diameter. The cervix is divided into supravaginal part, which is called as endocervix, and the part lying, that is the part lying above the vagina, and the vaginal part or the portio-vaginalis or exocervix, which lies within the vagina, and it is measuring about 1.25 centimeters. Endocervix is lined by a single layer of tall columnar epithelium and has a complex racemose gland secreting alkaline mucus. Portio-vaginalis or exocervix is lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. The place where columnar epithelium gradually changes into squamous epithelium is called squamo-columnar junction or the transformation zone. This is a very important point you have to remember. That the transformation zone is the most common site for the place where the carcinoma in situ, that is the precancerous lesions, will develop, which eventually develop into carcinoma. So this is a very important point we have to remember. So again, regarding the cervix, you have the external os, and the status of the external os will depend on the parity of the patient. External os will be pinpoint circular in nulliparous females, and it will be transverse slit-like in the multiparous females. So this could be an important differentiating factor. Another thing what you have to remember is that in the erect posture, internal os will lie at the level of the upper border of the symphysis pubis, and the external os will lie at the level of the ischial spines. Now, again, the internal os is the, as I said, it's the area between the anatomical and histological internal os. Now, what is the significance of this internal os? The level of this internal os is at the level of the internal os, the uterine artery, which is descending here, which joins, sorry, the pen is not working. Okay, the uterine artery coming over here, it reflects onto the body of the uterus at this point, that is at the internal os. As I explained, the peritoneum or the vesical fold of peritoneum also reflects at this level. And this is the point of identification of the internal os during the time of lower cesarean section. Then another point is the uterosacral ligaments lie at this level, that is at the posterior aspect of the uterus, and also the McEnroe's ligament, which are form the lateral supports of the uterus, also will be at below this level. So this is the significance of the internal os. Cervical mucus is always alkaline. The shape of the cervical canal is fusiform. The anterior posterior walls are opposed to each other, and the mucosal folds are therefore formed, which resemble the branches of the tree. That is called as arbor vitae. Blood supply to the cervix is mainly by the uterine artery, ovarian artery, as well as the descending cervical artery, which is a branch of the uterine artery. Lymphatic drainage of the cervix is very important because carcinoma cervix being the most common carcinoma which is there in the females, especially in the developing countries. So you need to know all the details about the lymphatic drainage. Uterus, the fundus drains into para-aortic or the lateral aortic lymph nodes. Body drains into external iliac lymph nodes. Cornua drains into superficial inguinal nodes along with the round ligament. Cervix, there is one mnemonic which will make you help remember the lymphatic drainage, that is IHO. Okay, so I stands for internal iliac lymph nodes, H stands for hypogastric lymph nodes, O stands for obturator lymph nodes, P for the presacral paracervical lymph nodes, and E for the external iliac lymph nodes. So this is one mnemonic you can remember for the lymphatic drainage of the cervix. Now again here, the points to remember are the most common lymph node which is involved in cancer cervix is obturator lymph node. First lymph node involved in cancer cervix is paracervical lymph node, which is also called as the ureteric lymph node. And CA cervix does not involve the superficial inguinal lymph node. This is again an important point to remember. Sensory supply to the uterus is from T10 to L1, cervix is from S2 to S4. Now, another important thing what you have to remember is the ratio between the corpus to the cervix. The corpus means the body of the uterus. So, the ratio of the body of the uterus to the cervix will vary depending on the age. So, at before puberty, the ratio of the body means body to the cervix is 1:2. Means the body is smaller than the cervix. The cervix is longer. That is before puberty. At puberty, under the influence of the hormones, what happens is the body or the corpus starts growing, and therefore the ratio changes from 2:1. The same thing continues, and in the adults or in the reproductive age group, the body is much bigger in respect to the cervix, and the ratio changes from 3:1 or 4:1. Whereas after menopause, because again under the influence of the hormones, the estrogen hormone being deficient, the atrophy occurs of all the tissues, and there is atrophy of the whole of the uterus as a complete thing. So is there any doubt? Are you all following? I'm just continuing like this without interaction. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, is the speed okay? Is there any change
Yes,
you want
ma'am.
me to follow?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you're all able to understand and follow the points?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the speed is good enough, or you want me to slow down or pretty faster?
No, good, ma'am. It's good.
Okay, so we're now, I think, half an hour's time with the beginning of the class.
Yes, ma'am. 25 minutes, ma'am.
Yeah,
No
right.
problem.
So how long are you guys with me? For me to kind of assess, because I need to cover up the MCQs as well.
Usually 1 hour, ma'am. One hour to 1 hour 50 minutes.
Okay,
1 hour to
so
1.5 hours.
right. So what we'll do is, as I told in the message as well, that I would take the MCQs as quiz. Okay. So I would just present the questions to you, and you quickly need to answer, one of you, right? So we'll see how many participants are there and how many will score how much, because all these questions are single line questions, and they're based on whatever the theory I've taught you, right? So I think we'll be able to finish in time then. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Right, I'll go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, so we are done with the vagina, uterus, and cervix, and then we move on to the fallopian tube. So all of you know the fallopian tube are 2 in number on either side of the uterus. So the length is usually 10 to 12 centimeters. There are 4 parts in the tube. The first one is the interstitial part or the intramural part, which is again a part in the uterus itself. Second is the isthmus. Third is the ampullary part, and then you have the fimbrial or the infundibulum, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is very important to remember. There are a lot of questions on this section. The interstitium or the intramural part is 1.25 centimeter long and 1 mm diameter. Therefore, it is the narrowest part of the fallopian tube. Remember, the interstitial or the intramural part is the narrowest part of the fallopian tube, and it has no longitudinal muscles, only circular muscles are present, and it acts as an anatomical sphincter. What you have to remember is anatomical sphincter. Then comes the isthmus, which is about 2.5 centimeters long. It is 2 mm in diameter. And it's the second narrowest part, and it acts as a physiological sphincter. Okay. Now, ampulla is the widest part and the longest part. It is 5 centimeters in length, and the fertilization occurs here. Whenever there is a fertilization occurring, it's most commonly in the ampullary portion of the fallopian tube. Then the fimbria is about 1.25 centimeters long. It has a maximum diameter of 6 mm. So histologically, fallopian tube is lined by ciliated columnar epithelium with a unique type of cell called PEG cells. Though the function of it is not known, but this is a favorite question in the exams. They have asked where you locate the PEG cells. So it is in the fallopian tubes that you have to remember. It also has secretory cells whose secretions are rich in pyruvate. Now, this pyruvate helps provide the nutrition to the conceptus, means the early developing fetus. Blood supply to the tube medially is by medial 2/3 is by uterine artery, lateral 1/3 is by ovarian artery. Lymphatic drainage, lateral part is along with the ovarian lymphatic drains into the lateral aortic lymph nodes, and medial part along with the cornua drains into the superficial inguinal lymph nodes. So the most important things you have to remember in fallopian tube is most common site of fertilization is ampulla. Most common site for ectopic pregnancy is again ampulla. Most common site for tubal abortion is again ampulla. most site of tubal rupture is isthmus. Why it is isthmus? Because as you can see, the isthmus is the narrower than ampulla,
Narrowest part.
right? So what
Yes, ma'am.
happens is whenever there is an ectopic pregnancy in the isthmus, because the isthmus is narrow, the rupture is much earlier and it's more common because the distensible capacity of the tube will be lesser here. So the most common site for tubal rupture is isthmus. Then the most common site for tubectomy is again isthmus. So whenever we do a tubectomy, we see that the tube is located in the isthmic portion of the tube, because as you can see here, in the isthmic portion, the diameter is pretty same. Like the diameter of about 2 mm is continuing for a longer period of time, is it not? So we do tubectomy at this portion because in case in the future, if at all the recanalization is required for the patient, then the recanalization will be much easier because the diameter of the two separated portions will be almost equal and the recanalization will be easier. So this is one of the reasons why we do tubectomy, recommend doing tubectomy in the isthmus. Okay. So remember, the
Yes,
most
ma'am.
common site for tubectomy is isthmus. Tubal rupture is isthmus. Now, best prognosis for reversibility or recanalization, as I mentioned, if is that whenever there is a tubectomy done in the isthmic part of the tube, the prognosis or what the scoring, what we do before recanalization for such patients will be much better. Okay. Did you understand
Yes,
this
ma'am.
point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Right. So coming to Bartholin's glands, a lot of questions again on this. There are two glands. They are homologous to Copper's glands or the bulbourethral glands in males, and they lie in the superficial perineal pouch, embedded in the posterior part of the vestibular bulb. The glands are oval in shape. They are size of a pea. They are impalpable unless enlarged. Remember this. The Bartholin's glands you cannot see nor you can palpate them. Only when there is a problem like a Bartholin cyst or a Bartholin's abscess is the only time when you can palpate or see them or they're enlarged. Okay. The acini of the Bartholin's glands is single layer of low columnar or cuboidal cells. So Bartholin's duct is about 2 centimeters long and it opens into the vestibule. This is an important point. It opens into the vestibule outside the hymen. Okay. It opens outside the hymen at the junction of anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3 in the groove between the hymen and the labia minora. So this is an important point because there has been an MCQ on this. Always there is a confusion where it opens. So remember, it opens outside the hymen in the groove between the hymen and the labia minora. Okay. Now the duct is lined by multilayered columnar epithelium. Function of the gland is to produce abundant alkaline mucus during sexual excitement. Skin's tubules are paraurethral glands equivalent to prostate in the males. And both the Bartholin's glands and skin tubules arise as downgrowths of the urogenital sinus. So Bartholin's cyst, as I told, when there is a pent-up secretions within the Bartholin's gland because of either the blockage of the duct or one of the glands, racemose glands of the Bartholin's gland, then there will be a penting up of the secretions and it will form a cyst. So what you can remember about Bartholin's cyst is it is most common cyst which is seen in the vulva, and most commonly if it gets infected, it is infected by the gonococcal infection, and it presents as a fluctuant non-tender. Whenever there is only a cyst without infection, it is non-tender. It presents as a small swelling, and typically, as I told, it will be present in between the junction of the anterior 2/3 and posterior 1/3 of the labia majora. Okay. And the most common approach for Bartholin cyst is we do marsupialization, where you can see in this figure, we cut open the superficial layer, see that all the secretions or the pent-up secretions are drained, and then we leave the wall open and just we stitch it to the vaginal opening or even the minoral skin opening, the labia majora skin opening. So we leave it open so that whatever secretions are there, they keep on draining out and they do not form the cyst again. So this procedure is called marsupialization. This is done in case of Bartholin cyst formation. Whereas if it gets infected and there is a pus formation and there is a Bartholin's abscess formation, the management will be incision and drainage, IND, which is there, which is a standard procedure for any abscess in the body. So that is one which is to be followed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So coming to the ovary, it measures about 3 by 2 by 1 centimeter. They are intraperitoneal structures lying in the ovarian fossa of Waldeyer on the lateral pelvic wall. It is formed at T10 and then it descends down the pelvis with the help of gubernaculum. Now, uterus divides the gubernaculum into ovarian ligament and the round ligament. The ovarian fossa is related posteriorly to the ureter, you can see here, and the internal iliac vessels, and laterally to the peritoneum, separating the obturator vessels and the nerve medially to the ovarian ligament. Here, this is important thing. What you have to remember is ovary is attached to the posterior layer of the broad ligament by the mesoovarium. Okay, so this is the broad ligament. This is the ovary. Posteriorly, it is attached by the mesoovarium. Laterally, it is attached to the lateral pelvic wall by the infundibulopelvic ligament. This is also called as the ligament of ovarian ligament or the ligament of Cooper sometimes. Now it is also attached, the ovary is attached to the uterus by the ovarian ligament or the uterovarian ligament. Sorry, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So you have to remember the infundibulopelvic ligament, ovary to pelvis, ovary to uterus is the uterine or the uterovarian or the ovarian ligament. Mesoovarium is to the broad ligament. Blood supply is by ovarian artery. Drainage is by the ovarian vein. Excuse me. Here you remember the drainage is on the left side. It drains directly into the left renal vein, right? And on the right side, it drains into the inferior vena cava. On the right side, all the ovarian vein will form a plexus, what we call as the Pampiniform plexus, and that will drain directly into the inferior vena cava on the right side. On the left side, it drains into the left renal vein. That is an important point to remember. Then coming to the nerve supplies by ovarian plexus, lymphatic drainage is to para-aortic lymph nodes as well as through the genital tract ovarian artery. It arises from the aorta below the renal artery and branches in the pelvis other than the ovary. I think there is some confusion here. Remember, lymphatic drainage is to the para-aortic lymph nodes. Now, just a small table to kind of remind you on the lining epithelium of different structures in the pelvis. Bartholin's gland is a single layer of low columnar cells. Bartholin's duct is multi-layered columnar cells. Adult vagina is stratified squamous epithelium. Newborn vagina is transitional epithelium. Uterus is columnar epithelium. Cervix is high columnar epithelium. Ectocervix is squamous epithelium. And fallopian tube is ciliated columnar epithelium. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So the lining epithelium of the organ is again important, as I told, because the variety or the histological type of the cancer which is arising from that structure will again depend on the lining epithelium. That's why we need to remember the histology. Now, the most common histological type of cancer depends on the lining epithelium, as I have told. The most common variety of fallopian tube cancer is adenocarcinoma. Most common variety of uterine cancer is adenocarcinoma, as the lining is epithelial columnar. Most common variety of vaginal cancer is squamous cell carcinoma. In cervix, endocervix is lined by columnar epithelium and exocervix is lined by squamous epithelium. Hence, in all females, there is an area in the cervix where we have already discussed that is called as transformation zone. Is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
So here,
Spermocolumnar.
one type of epithelium is changing into other type, and this is the most common site of cancer cervix. And the most common variety of cancer cervix is squamous cell cancer. But since the endocervix is lined by columnar epithelium, sometimes there will be cancerous lesions from this epithelium as well, and in that case, the histological type will be adenocarcinoma. Okay. But the most common variety is squamous cell cancer. Are you clear with this points?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. Now coming to the internal iliac artery, this is again an important structure in the pelvis. It's the main feeding vessel to all the pelvic organs. You have to remember it has an anterior division and a posterior division. Are you able to see the complete slide here?
No, ma'am.
Till parietal branches.
Yeah, even I'm okay, fine. So remember that the posterior division of the internal aortic artery does not give any visceral branches. Only the anterior division gives the visceral branches supplying to the different structures in the pelvis. Mainly, they are superior vesicle, obliterated umbilical, inferior vesicle, middle rectal, and uterine. These arise from the anterior division. And the parietal branches of the anterior division are vaginal, obturator, and there is inferior gluteal. Posterior division does not give any visceral branch, and other parietal branches of the posterior division is iliolumbar, sacral, and I think superior gluteal. Okay. See, it's also called as the hypogastric artery. And why it is important clinically is whenever there is a postpartum hemorrhage, especially atonic or even traumatic PPH, in the ligation of the internal iliac artery is one of the life-saving procedures which is done on the patient. Do you understand? It gives off anterior and posterior division, right? So the anterior division is the one which is supplying to the visceral structures in the pelvis. So it is the ligation of only the anterior division of the internal iliac artery, which is done as a procedure for controlling the postpartum hemorrhage as a life-saving procedure of the patient. Did you get this?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So the site of ligation has to be carefully chosen. It's about 2.5 to 3 centimeters distal to the bifurcation of the common iliac artery, and this is to preserve the posterior division of the internal iliac artery. And therefore, you preserve the blood supply to the lower limb. So next, coming to the uterine artery, it's again a branch of the anterior division of the internal iliac artery. It descends along the lateral border of the uterus in a tortuous course. Here you can see it descends down here tortuously. 2 centimeters lateral to the cervix, it crosses the ureter. You can see here the ureter, and it crosses here at the level of the cervix. This is very important where there is a crossing of the uterine artery and the ureters, because the chances of injury to the ureter during the hysterectomy, when we do the second clamp in the hysterectomy by clamping the uterine arteries, if we go a little laterally where it crosses the ureter, then the chances of damaging the ureter are pretty high. So that's why this is a very important point to remember, that the uterine artery crosses over the ureter at this level, and this is the most common site of ureteric injury during hysterectomy. The branches of uterine artery include the arcuate arteries, the radial artery, basal artery, and then the spiral arteries as it pierces into the walls of the uterus. Coming to the pelvic ureter, again an important structure in the pelvis. It extends crossing over the pelvic brim. It then opens up into the bladder. It measures 13 to 15 centimeters in length and 5 mm in diameter. The ureter enters the pelvis in front of the bifurcation of the common iliac artery. Can you appreciate in the figure? At the level of the sacroiliac joint. As it courses downwards, it lies anterior to the internal iliac artery first, and then medial to the obturator nerves and vessels, and forms the posterior boundary of the ovarian fossa here. On reaching the ischial spines, it lies over the pelvic floor and courses forwards and medial on the base of the broad ligament. It is crossed by the uterine artery anteriorly at the level of the cervix as described. And then it enters into the ureteric tunnel and lies close to the supravaginal portion of the cervix, and it about 1.5 centimeters lateral to it, and then it enters the bladder at the trigone. All right, it's the same thing what I have described. The important thing is blood supply, venous drainage, lymphatics, and nerve supply. I'll go a little faster here. Yeah, one thing what you have to remember is again the ureter where it is constricted is at the pelvic brim, at the level where it is crossed by the uterine artery, and in the intravesical part. So these are the three areas where it is constricted. Important point here is how do you recognize this ureter during surgery? It is recognized by its pale, glistening appearance, longitudinal vessels on the surface, and the most important is the peristalsis. Okay. Coming to the pelvic floor is a muscular partition which separates the pelvic cavity from the anatomical perineum. It consists of two levator ani muscles composed of pubococcygeus, iliococcygeus, and ischococcygeus muscles. I think I'll skip this one. It's also called as pelvic diaphragm, the pelvic floor. Right here, the perineum, you can see it's on the surface of the body. The perineum in this region where the external genitalia and anus are located. Anatomically, the perineum is bounded above by the inferior surface of the pelvic floor, below by the skin between the buttocks and thighs. Laterally, it is bounded by the ischiopubic rami, ischial tuberosities, and the sacrotuberous ligaments by the coccyx. As perineum is rhomboid in shape and can be divided into anterior, that is the urogenital triangle, and posterior, that is the posterior triangle areas, that is the anal triangle. Now, the urogenital triangle is placed between the two ischiopubic rami, stretching transversely across the rami. From about onwards, you can see part of the pelvic fascia constitutes the superior fascia of the urogenital diaphragm. The second membrane is the inferior fascia of the urogenital diaphragm. It is thick and also called as the perineal membrane. And the most superficial membrane is the membranous layer of the superficial fascia. So here, what happens is because of these attachments, the perineum or the space is divided into superficial space and the deep perineal space. Between the upper and the middle membranes, that is, this is the upper and the middle membranes, there is a deep perineal space of the pouch. The deep perineal pouch, the important points to remember here is you should remember what contents are there in each of the spaces, that is the deep perineal space and the superficial perineal space. So in the deep perineal space, we have the deep transverse perinei, which are 2 in number, and the sphincter urethra membranaceum. Whereas in the superficial perineal pouch, you have the superficial transverse perineum, bulbocavernosus, ischiocavernosus, and the Bartholin's gland. So the contents of the each of these spaces is important points to be remembered. Another thing is the perineal body. Now the perineal body is a central tendon of the perineum is a fibromuscular body. It is placed in the median plane at the junction of the anal and the urogenital triangles. It is pyramidal in shape and it has all the 3 layers of the muscles, that is levator ani, deep transverse perineum, superficial muscles, except the ischiocavernosus, and fibers of the external and anal sphincter. So all of them converge at the perineal body here. Coming to broad ligament, this is just a fan-like structure on the lateral aspect of the uterus. It extends up to the lateral pelvic wall, and important thing to remember, it's just a fold of peritoneum and it does not have any role in supporting the position of the uterus. That's the thing to remember. Different parts include infundibulopelvic ligament, that is which attaches the ovary to the lateral pelvic wall. Mesoovarium, which is attaching the ovary to the broad ligament posteriorly. Mesosalpinx is the part of the broad ligament which is attached to the inferior portion of the tube. Right? So these are the different parts of the broad ligament. Pelvic cellular tissue is one important tissue. What you have to remember is a condensed deep tissue of the pelvis, and this forms the main support for all the pelvic organs, that is the cervix, vagina, as well as the uterus. So these pelvic cellular tissue condenses into different tissues. As you can see, anteriorly you have the pubocervical ligament, laterally the McEnroe's or the cardinal ligament, and posteriorly the uterosacral ligaments. So all these structures form a good support to the internal genital organs. That's an important point to remember. So as you see here about the round ligament, as you all know, it's about 10 to 12 centimeters. It attaches from the corner of the uterus at one end and it terminates at the anterior third of the labium majus. Okay, so embryologically it corresponds to the gubernaculum of the testis, and it continues in the inguinal region to come and attach at the anterior part of the labium majus. This is again about the round ligament. Yeah, important point here is that it contains only plain muscles, that is the stratified the skeletal muscles. It does not contain any smooth muscles or the connective tissue. There was one question on this as well. So this is an important point to remember about the round ligament. And another thing to remember is the round ligament is not one structure which is maintaining the anteverted position of the uterus. Though it is not an important structure which is responsible for the anteverted position of the uterus, but during surgeries for retroverted uteruses, we have extreme retroverted uteruses condition where the uterus is completely retroverted and falls back, and because of that, the patient has a lot of problems. So in those corrective procedures for retroversion uterus, we do the plication of the round ligament where the round ligament is shortened and tied up. But then important thing you have to remember is it does not maintain the anteversion position, but the surgery for the retroversion is a round ligament plication or shortening of the round ligaments. Did you get this point?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Did you all get this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah? Okay. So I think I'm done with the basic explanation of the theory. We'll now jump on to the questions, MCQs based on this.
Okay, ma'am.
I just wanted to see how many of you are there along with me. So there are 9 of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, all 9 of you are there with me.
Six students, ma'am.
6 of you are here.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you all open up your microphones or on your microphone so that you can answer when I'm asking the questions?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So now that you are at least brushed up with anatomy, I hope these all the questions, whatever are there coming up, are all one-liners and they're very easy. Okay, so I want you to quickly answer them. Is everybody, I mean, in the talking mode with the microphone on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
I can hear just 2 voices.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So everybody is with your microphone on?
Yes, ma'am.
Should we start with the FAQs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm not going to give you any explanation regarding the MCQs. Okay, we'll quickly brush through the MCQs with your answers. Hmm? And if there's any question which you need to be explained in detail with the discussion, please let me know. We can touch upon that thing. Because we're already running out of time. It's already 6 o'clock. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
right. So we'll start with the MCQs.
Okay, ma'am.
Are you all ready?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Fine. Here comes the first question. Now, all of the following pelvic structures support the vagina except perineal body, A, B, pelvic diaphragm, C, levator ani muscle, D, infundibular pelvic ligament.
Infundibulous pelvic ligament.
Why?
It supports the ovaries it attaches the ovaries to the pelvic bone.
Right, correct. Everybody agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next, all are related to lateral vaginal fornix except A, ureters, B, Meckenrod's, C, inferior vesical artery, D, uterine artery.
Uh,
Yes? Try to answer with exclusion. Lateral vaginal fornix.
And
What comes
McIntosh
lateral to the
ligament.
vaginal fornix? Ureter is there.
Yes, ma'am.
yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Meckenrod's is there. Meckenrod's is nothing but cardinal ligaments. It is there.
Yes, ma'am.
Uterine
Uterine
artery.
artery.
What? The answer is uterine artery?
Yes, ma'am.
No, that's wrong.
Not,
Anybody
ma'am.
else?
Uterine artery is like it goes side by side, ma'am.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
what is the answer?
Inferior vesical artery.
Everybody, anybody else with any other answer? Will freeze on
No.
inferior vesical artery.
Ma'am, I think McIntyre's ligaments.
Why do you think so?
Um,
Is it not
it
related
may
to the lateral vaginal fornix? McIntyre's.
it's mainly support the means strongest support of the uterus. It's like
Yeah, it is the strongest support of the uterus, of course. But what you have to remember is it's a pelvic cellular tissue. Understood? So it will extend from below the uterus until the vaginal fornices as well. So it's a good support for the vagina as well. So the answer here is inferior vesical artery. It's not related to the lateral vaginal fornix, whereas all the other structures are related. As you can see, ureters are there. The McIntyre's is of course there, and then the uterine artery, as we discussed, is the one structure which crosses the ureters at the level of the internal os. Is it not? So then it will be related to the lateral vaginal wall, where lateral vaginal fornix or the walls. So the answer here is inferior vesical artery. This
okay,
is the
ma'am.
structure which is not related, whereas all other structures are related. Got it?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
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 Third question, the pH of the vagina in adults is A, 3.5 to 4.5,
B,
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 B, ma'am.
4.5 to 5.5. So you're all
B.
thorough with this, right? So it's correct. B is 4.5 to 5.5. Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Protective bacterium in normal vagina is
Yeah.
Peptostreptococcus, Lactobacillus,
Lactobacillus.
Acidovaginus,
Lactobacillus.
Lactobacillus.
Lactobacillus. What is the other name for it?
Array.
What is the other name for the lactobacillus found in the vagina? Come on. Okay.
Yes.
The main source of physiological secretion found in the vagina is Bartholin's glands, Gartner's duct, vagina, cervix.
Bart.
Bartholin's
Bartholin's
gland.
Bartholin's.
glands.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am.
Which one?
Bartholin.
Bartholin.
Bartholin's gland.
Bartholin's. Anybody else?
Cervix.
Who said cervix?
Akash.
Yeah, why cervix, Akush?
Uh,
Yes, come on. You're right, actually cervix, because that's the main source of the vaginal secretion, because the cervix is always lined with glands, is it not? So there is the
yes, ma'am.
secretion from the cervical gland always, whereas in the secretion on the Bartholin's glands is only during the sexual excitement. So this is not the main source of vagina. And the third option, that is vagina, is excluded because vagina does not have any
Does not have any.
mucus secreting
Secretions.
glands. So the answer will be cervix.
Cervix.
Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Sixth question. With reference to vagina, which of the following statement is not correct? A. It has mucus secreting gland. B. It is supplied by uterine artery. C. It is lined by Stratford's squamous epithelium. D. Its posterior wall is covered by peritoneum.
First
A.
A.
option, ma'am.
Sorry?
Mucus secreting
A.
glands.
It is not.
A.
First
It
option.
is mucus secreting glands.
B. Yeah?
A.
A,
Ma'am.
ma'am.
And A.
A. A. That is, it has mucus secreting gland is the incorrect answer, is it not? As we
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
discussed
ma'am.
earlier. All other things are true to the vagina. Understood?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
Now, which of the following about lymphatics of vulva is true? Do not cross the labiocrural fold, traverse the labia from medial to lateral, drain directly into deep femoral glands, do not freely communicate with each other. Yes, this is a bit tricky one here. Anybody? Yeah? We'll come back to this this question later on if time permits, because we need to discuss few points about the lymphatics of this vulva. Okay.
Okay.
Anybody with an definite answer and points to back that? No?
No.
We'll go to the next question. Now, uterine cervix ratio up to 10 years of age is 3:1. A is 3:2, B is 2:1, C is 3:1, and D is 1:2.
2:1. B.
1:2.
Uterine to cervix up to 10 years means before puberty.
Yes, ma'am. 1:2.
2:1.
Why there is a confusion? Why there is a
Ma'am,
confusion?
before 10 years, 1:2. During reproductive age, 2:1. Then
Yeah.
later, 3:1.
Yeah, so he is right. The other girl there who was telling this 2:1 is wrong, because you remember under the influence of the estrogen, after the puberty only the corpus or the body of the uterus will grow. Is it not? So until then, the body of the uterus is smaller than the cervix in younger age group. So the ratio in up to 10 years of age for uterus to cervix will be 1:2. That is the right answer. Okay.
Yes.
The epithelial lining of cervical canal is low columnar, high columnar, stratified squamous, or ciliated columnar. Epithelial lining of cervical canal.
High
D.
columnar.
High columnar.
Yeah, high columnar is the correct answer. Correct. Nabothian follicles occur in erosion of cervix, carcinoma endometrium, carcinoma cervix, carcinoma vagina. Anybody? Where do you find Nabothian follicles first of all?
Mucous filled sheath, ma'am. Surface of the cervix.
Correct. It's on the cervix, mainly the ectocervix or the fossa vaginalis. So why are Nabothian follicles formed? Is it
Ma'am,
related to any cancer?
like stratified squamous epithelium from ectocervix grows over the simple columnar epithelium of endocervix.
Correct. Correct. Yes. So what happens? See, one thing you have to remember, Nabothian follicle is
It's a
just
benign, ma'am, not
it's a
a.
simple lesion. Okay, it's not related to any cancerous lesion.
It's a
Since all
benign
the
benign
three,
lesion.
yeah, it's a benign thing. Since all the three options here are based are only for cancer, endometrium, cervix, and vagina, it's much easier for you to exclude all these and like choose
Yes, ma'am.
erosion of the cervix as the answer. Understood? But of course, you have to remember how it is formed, why it is formed, because if the options are changed and if they give any other simple lesion of the cervix as a choice, then you will be getting confused. So here you remember Nabothian follicles occur in the erosion of the cervix. That's the right answer, the answer A. Now Nabothian follicles are formed in the cervix or ectocervix. As we have discussed earlier, the cervix is lined inside by the columnar epithelium and outside by the squamous epithelium.
Squamous.
So what happens is there will be overgrowth of the columnar epithelium sometimes onto the outer cervix. That is, the columnar epithelium will overgrow over the squamous epithelium. That is called as erosion of the cervix. Understood. So once the columnar epithelium of the cervix is exposed to the exterior, there will be chances of infection. So once they get infected and multiple infections and fibrosis will lead to blockage of the ducts of the cervical glands. So those will again result in small fluid-filled cavities, that is nothing but the Nabothian follicles. So these Nabothian follicles are as a result of erosion of the cervix. They are found on the outer side of the cervix. Is it clear for all of you?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. 11th one, Bartholin's duct opens into A. Labia majora and minora, B. A groove between labia minora
B.
and hymen, lower vagina, upper vagina.
B. Groove between labia minora and
Group between labia minor and hymen.
Right, good. Hello. So all of you are thorough with this, is it not? Don't get confused
yes,
with
ma'am.
this. So it's B, answer is correct. 12th, a woman presents with a fluctuant non-tender swelling at the introitus. The best treatment is marsupialization, incision and drainage, surgical resection, aspiration.
Marsupialization.
Marsupialization.
It's
Marsupialization.
Bartholin.
Marsupialization is the right answer. Why marsupialization? Here you need to make a small diagnosis, is it not?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
it's,
Bartholin.
it's indicating fluctuant means there is a fluid thing. Non-tender means it's not infected.
Yes, ma'am.
And the most common swelling at the introitus is a
Bartholin.
Bartholin cyst. So what is the treatment for it?
Marsupialization.
Marsupialization. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
They had given as a question as a painful
Then-
swelling, then it
then
would indicate a Bartholin's abscess. And
Incision
then
and
the
drainage.
treatment for it would be IND.
Incision and drainage.
Yeah. Okay. Next, Bartholin cyst is caused by Candida, anaerobes, Gonococcus, or Trichomonas. Most commonly it is Gonococcus, correct? But then there could be other organisms as well. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
14th. Narrowest part of the fallopian tube is interstitial
Isthmus.
portion,
Interstitial portion.
isthmus, infundibulum, ampulla.
A.
Yes.
Interstitial portion.
Isthmus, ma'am.
Isthmus.
B.
No, here the answer is A. That is
Interstitial.
interstitial portion is the narrowest. That's about 1 mm only. Whereas isthmus is the next narrowest. That is about 2 mm as I explained to you earlier. So remember this, narrowest portion is interstitial
Interstitial.
portion. Peg cells are seen in vagina, vulva, ovary, tubes.
Tubes. D. Tubes.
Tube.
Yeah,
Fallopian
I
tube.
did mention about this peg cells in the talk, right? So they're found in the
Fallopian.
tubes, though the significance of it we do not know, but they are seen in the tubes.
Tubes.
The length of the fallopian tube is 8 to 10 centimeters, 10 to 12 centimeters, 15 to 18 centimeters, 18 to 20 centimeters.
10 to 12.
10 to
Correct.
3.
Uterine artery is a branch of A. Aorta, common iliac, internal iliac, external iliac.
Internal iliac.
Internal
iliac.
iliac. C.
Correct. Vaginal epithelium is derived from A. Endoderm of urogenital sinus, B. Mesoderm of urogenital sinus, C. Endoderm of genital ridge, D. Mesoderm of genital ridge. Anybody?
I mean, endoderm of urogenital sinus.
Yeah, it's the correct answer is endoderm of urogenital sinus. That's the correct answer. We'll go in detail about the embryological development and all in the future classes. Okay, as of now, you remember it's the endoderm of urogenital sinus. Next, anatomical sphincter of fallopian tubes: ampulla, isthmus, intramural, infundibulum.
Intramural.
Correct. Intramural is correct as I explained. Anatomical sphincter is intramural portion. Which is the physiological sphincter?
Yes, ma'am.
Which is the physiological sphincter of the fallopian tubes?
Isthmus.
Isthmus. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Next one. With regards to labia majora, all are correct except it is homologous to scrotum in males. It is supplied by branches of internal and external pudendal arteries. It drains into superficial inguinal lymph nodes. The broad ligament terminates at its anterior end.
B.
Come on.
B.
D or B?
Ma'am, D
Ma'am, D.
terminates at posterior.
Posterior end, ma'am.
The broad ligament terminates at its
Posterior end.
the broad ligament. Where will the broad ligament come at labia majora? No? Broad ligament is only the internal structure, is it not? What is the structure which comes and attaches to the labia majora? I have explained earlier. Which structure or which ligament comes and attaches to the labia majora? It's the round ligament. As I told, it courses from the cornal end of the uterus into the superficial, into the deep inguinal ring, then superficial inguinal ring, comes and attaches to the labia majora. It's the round ligament. Okay. Broad ligament is only in the internal level. It's only attaches on the lateral side of the uterus. It's nowhere related to the external genitalia. Understood? Don't get confused here. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, 21, with regards to vagina, all are correct except means which is the incorrect statement. Makes an angle of 45 degrees with a horizontally in erect posture. Looks like letter H on cross section. Vaginal axis lies parallel to the uterus and at the right angles to the plane of the axis of the inlet. It is lined by stratified squamous epithelium.
इसकी height
Sorry?
Ma'am,
Right
C.
answer. C.
C, ma'am.
The incorrect statement, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
What is incorrect here?
Sir, ma'am, perpendicular.
What is perpendicular?
Means axis.
Oh, yeah. So what they here, this statement in the C is the vaginal axis lies parallel to the uterus.
It's
Whereas it makes an angle with the uterus, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
That's about,
Ni- 90.
yeah. So it's about 90
90.
degrees angle, that is with the uterus. And as I explained earlier, it is parallel to the plane of the axis of the inlet. The vaginal axis is parallel to the plane of the axis of the inlet. Here they have given it is at right angles to the plane of the axis of the inlet, which is wrong statement. All other statements are correct.
Ma'am, the C is correct in retroverted, ma'am,
In retroverted.
position, like before, like you're trying to touch cases.
In retroversion also there has to be an angle between the vagina and the uterus. Is it not? It
No,
can't be
like it'll
parallel.
be. Oh, in that case, C will be right, no, ma'am.
Which one?
Option C will be correct in case of retroversion.
See, in case of retroversion, only the angle between the uterus and the vagina changes. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So that the uterus will fall back on the posterior aspect of the pelvis. So here only the angle between the uterus and the vagina changes. Understood? So
Yes,
it is
ma'am.
never parallel. The vaginal axis and the uterine axis will not be parallel. There will still be an angle there. And
Okay,
one
ma'am.
more thing is the axis of the vagina with respect to the pelvic inlet never changes. The axis of the vagina will be same. It has to be same whatsoever, even if it is anteverted or retroverted. It will be same. So even if they ask this question for the retroverted uterus, it will be wrong.
Yes, ma'am.
Understood? The plane of the vagina will always be parallel to the plane of the inlet. It will not be at right angles at any moment. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll
Yes,
try
ma'am.
to explain with a figure next time. Let's see. We'll go ahead now. So are you clear with this question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So next one, vaginal defense is lost within 10 days of birth, after 10 days of birth, during pregnancy, at puberty. Which is the main mode of vaginal defense? What is the thing which protects the vaginal infections?
Ma'am,
pH
pH.
pH of the vagina.
As I explained earlier, what is the pH of the vagina?
4.5 to 5.
4.5 to 5.5.
Yeah, so it's acidic, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, how is the acidic pH of the vagina maintained?
Lactobacillus.
Lactobacillus converts
What
glucose into lactic acid.
lactobacillus converts?
Glycogen to
Glycogen into lactic acid.
Yeah, glycogen is converted into lactic acid under the influence of the hormone estrogen by
carbon.
the lactobacilli which is present in the vagina. Now, what happens to the presence of these lactobacilli depending on the age, as I explained earlier? When it appears, when it disappears? Come on. Dodelins, I had put up a table,
Pregnancy.
right? Dodelins bacilli appears, disappears. Okay, now at least do you remember what is the pH of the vagina at different times of the age? What is the pH within 10 days of birth? Hmm? Forgot so early, all of you.
Ma'am, it's more acidic.
More?
Acidic.
Yeah, within 10 days it is acidic because Rhodiolis bacilli are there. Especially what happens is in those cases at birth, the reason what you can give is because of the influence of the maternal estrogen. Okay, some amount of maternal estrogen is passed to the baby initially. So within first 10 days of birth, there is still a defense mechanism from the vagina. So that's why there will be some protection within.
ओ मैम ही निकल गई है.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think there was some issue with the connections, and thanks to Dr. Ramya and sir, they have got us back. So should I continue with the presentation? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
So we were discussing this question, right? Vaginal defense is lost.
Yes, ma'am.
Based on these, the defense mechanism, as I discussed, is mainly the vaginal pH or the acidic vaginal pH. So within 10 days of birth, the pH is still acidic because under the influence of the estrogen derived from the mother.
Internal
So
estrogen.
Dodelin's bacilli are there. Whereas after 10 days of birth, the estrogen effect fades away, Dodelin's bacilli disappear. Understood. So the answer
Yes,
here,
ma'am.
after 10 days
After
of
10
birth,
days.
the vaginal defense is lost. Whereas
Yes.
the defense is still maintained during pregnancy as well as puberty. So these two questions, these two options are out of question, right? So answer is after 10 days of birth. Remember this.
Yes, ma'am.
23rd question. Ovary is attached to the posterior layer of the broad ligament by mesovarium, has hilus cells in the cortex. Ovarian veins drain into inferior vena cava, is connected to the uterus by the infundibulopelvic ligament. Which is right amongst these statements?
A.
Excuse me.
Ma'am, ovarian vein drain into inferior vena cava. Left.
Okay, that's partially right. I had explained to you, right? Is it same on both the sides? The
No, ma'am.
drainage of the ovarian?
Renal vein on the left.
Here they
Ma'am, A.
mention ovarian veins. Veins means both the sides. But as I have explained already, it is different on the right and the left side, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
So can you tell me which drains into what side? On the right side, it
Left.
drains
Left
into.
is.
Inferior vena
Ma'am.
cava.
Left
Yes,
side,
ma'am.
it drains into
Renal.
Inferior vena cava.
left
Left vein.
renal vein. Left renal vein in the left side, inferior vena cava on the right side. So the answer C is wrong. It's not correct.
Ma'am, A is correct.
A
A
is
is
correct, ma'am.
correct because it is attached to the posterior of the broad ligament by the mesovarium. That is the right statement. Second statement, that is has hilus cells in the cortex, is wrong because the hilus cells are present in the medulla of the ovary,
Medulla.
not the cortex. Okay. And the last statement D is again wrong because it says that is connected to the uterus by the infundibulopelvic ligament. What is infundibulopelvic ligament? Where does it connect the ovary to?
Posterior pelvic wall.
Posterior.
Lateral
Pelvic.
pelvic wall. Lateral
Lateral pelvic.
pelvic wall. That is the infundibulopelvic ligament. It is not connecting to the uterus. It is the one which is connecting to the lateral pelvic wall. Whereas the one which is connecting to the uterus is the ovarian ligament. Understood? So the answer here is A. Next, the fallopian tube is lined entirely by ciliated columnar epithelium, has a submucous layer, undergoes shedding during menstrual cycle, surrounded by peritoneum on all sides except along the line of attachment of the mesosalpinx. Which is correct statement?
A.
A, ma'am.
A is lined entirely by ciliated columnar epithelium. Is it so? That's a wrong statement. It is not lined entirely by ciliated columnar. Sometimes it is ciliated, sometimes it is only columnar epithelium. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Which is the next option, correct option? Does it has a submucous layer?
No, ma'am.
No, so that is ruled out. Does the epithelium undergo shedding during menstrual cycle?
No, ma'am.
No. So what is the correct answer then?
D. Surrounded by
D is
peritoneum.
correct, is it not? See, whatever it is, the other three statements, the last one is definitely correct. That is, it is surrounded by the peritoneum on all the sides except along the line of attachment of the mesosalpinx. What is mesosalpinx?
Mesentery.
क्या हो गया? अटक जाते हैं.
What ಮಾಡ್ಲಿ? ನಾನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ ತಾನು. Yeah. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there was some again disconnection. Now you're all there?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah, so are you clear with this question? We'll move on to the next one quickly, okay? 25.
Yes, ma'am.
All are true about the round ligament, except measures 12 centimeters in length, is homologous to the gubernaculum testis, C lies anterior to the obturator artery along its course, D contains smooth muscles. Quick. Which is wrong about the round ligament, in other words? Does it measure 12 centimeters in length? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So is it homologous to the gubernaculum in testis?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So lies anterior to the obturator artery along its course, as it is traversing through the pelvis. It lies anterior to the obturator artery, is it not? So the answer here is D. That is the wrong.
Contains-
That is, it contains smooth muscles is wrong. It just contains some connective tissue as well as some skeletal muscle fibers, not the smooth muscle fibers. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. We'll move to the next one. 26 says all of the following are true with respect to ligation of the internal iliac artery, except A, for hemostasis, anterior division is to be ligated. B, collateral circulation is established later between middle sacral and lateral sacral arteries. C, bleeding is always controlled with it. D, the artery should be ligated and not transected. Which is a wrong statement amongst the four? A is correct or right, correct or wrong? Hemostasis, which division you ligate of the internal iliac artery? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Anterior division.
When do you do internal iliac artery ligation first of all?
Ma'am, PPH.
Right. So which division you ligate, anterior or posterior? Come on, which is the division which supplies the pelvic viscera or the pelvic organs? Are you
Ma'am.
there?
Yes, ma'am.
Ah. It's the anterior division, is it not? Anterior division supplies to the pelvic viscera, and you want to stop the blood supply to the pelvic viscera, that is the uterus during the PPH. So you ligate only the anterior division of the internal iliac artery. So that answer is correct. The first A option is correct. So once you do the ligation, what happens? Collateral circulation is established, is it not, between the other arteries?
Yes, ma'am.
So the second statement is also correct. Third statement is bleeding is always controlled with it. Do you think so? Whenever there is a PPH, just the
Not
internal
always.
iliac artery ligation, do you think it might control or may not control sometimes?
It not always control, ma'am.
Right. So that could the answer, the option C could be the answer, is it not? So we'll just keep that in mind and then go to the fourth statement. It is the artery should be ligated and not transected. Is it correct? Should we transect the artery or ligate the artery?
Ligate?
Ligate, ma'am.
Yeah, always you just have to ligate the artery, not transect, because what you're doing, the procedure is just the temporarily you're kind of diverting the blood supply of that particular organ to different stream, and the pulse pressure is reduced there. Okay, once you ligate any vessel, the pulse pressure reduces and the blood supply to that particular organ reduces, and therefore the bleeding will be immediately controlled to a very great extent, though it is not always controlled well. So you remember the artery should be ligated always and it is not transected. And because of the ligation, the pulse pressure reduces and the blood supply toward the particular organ comes down. And therefore, collateral circulation also develops from the other blood vessels or the arteries. So the answer here is the bleeding is always controlled with it is not the right statement about the internal iliac artery ligation, whereas all other statements are correct. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So next, with regards to the nerve supply of pelvis, all are correct except The sensory component of the pudendal nerve supplies the skin of vulva, clitoris, perineum, and lower vagina. B. The motor component of pudendal nerve supplies all the muscles of the pelvic floor. C. The anterior half of the vulva is supplied by the ilioinguinal and genitofemoral nerves. D. Is the posterior half of the vulva is supplied by the ilioinguinal nerve only. Anybody for this? Because we have not gone into the details of the nerve supply. Anybody quickly? You can all read in detail about the nerve supply of the pelvis for this. I'll give you the answer here. It's D. D is the
D,
correct
ma'am.
answer for this question. Whereas that is the posterior half of the vulva is supplied by the ilioinguinal nerve only. Okay. All other statements are correct. We'll go to the
Yes, ma'am.
next one.
Yes, ma'am.
Now the triangular area bounded by clitoris, fossa, and labia minora is fossa navicularis, fossa, vestibule, or the vulva. What is the name for the triangular area which is having the above boundaries? I've explained this already.
Fossa navicularis, ma'am.
Huh?
A.
Fossa navicularis, ma'am.
Fossa navicularis is the wrong answer. Anybody else? See, it's a wide area. Fossa navicularis is a very small area which is there lying in between the perineal body as well as the posterior commissure. That is the place where the two labia minora will meet posteriorly. So from there until the perineal body is fossa navicularis. It is just like a small fossa. So it can't be bounded by clitoris. Where is the clitoris? Is on the superior aspect. Is it not?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
how can it be only fossa navicularis? Fossa navicularis is lying lower down. You can see in the figure later on. The area whatever they have given is a wide area that is extending from clitoris above and the fourchette, that is labia minora, below. Labia minora on either side and fourchette below. So it's a wide area. What is that area called? It is it vulva?
No, ma'am.
Why not?
Vulva is total structure is called
Yeah, so
vulva.
it should include even the mons veneris and the perineal body, everything, is it not? So whatever the structure they mentioned here is a part of the vulva. It's not the whole vulva, correct? So answer D is wrong. So which is a part of the vulva which they mentioned here, which could be the answer? Fourchette or vestibule now? Fossa navicularis is ruled out, vulva is ruled out.
Vestibule.
Vestibule, ma'am.
Yeah, it has to be vestibule, is it not? Fourchette is just a kind of a joining area of the two labia minora. So it can't be an area. Whereas vestibule is an area which is bounded by these three structures. So that's why the answer here is vestibule. And another important question on the vestibule, as I discussed earlier, is what are the number of openings in the vestibule? How
4.
many openings are there in the vestibule?
4.
4 structures open, of course, but total number of openings will be 6. Because there are 2 skin glands and 2 Bartholin's glands, 1 urethral and 1 vaginal opening. Understood?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Next one, fourchette is where both labia minora meet posteriorly, both labia majora meet posteriorly, labia minora and majora meet, distance between vulva and labia minora. Quickly, this is a very easy one. We just discussed it in the last question.
Labia minora meet, ma'am.
Posteriorly. Okay, that's the area which is called as fourchette. Correct. Next, glands of Litter are homologous to Bartholin's glands, Cowper's glands, Keene glands, or glands on labia. We have not touched upon this. Anybody with the answer? Yes?
Ma'am, it's urethra of.
What is gland of Litter? Anybody know? I'll give you the answer here. Glands of Litter are glandulae prepucialis of the penile portion of the male urethra. Okay. So they are homologous to the glands on the labia in the female. So the answer here is D. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
We'll go to the next one. For hormonal study, the sample should be taken from which wall of the vagina? Anterior, posterior, lateral, or any wall? Yes? First of all, do we do sampling from the vagina for the hormonal studies? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we do, right? So did I not explain to you, depending on the estrogen level, progesterone level, you can see what type of cells in the vaginal epithelium. Discussed, right? Parabasal cells, superficial cells, intermediate cells.
Yes, ma'am.
And the predominance will depend on the presence of the hormone. So, so we do take the sample from the vagina for the hormonal studies. That is one thing. But from where do we take? Anterior, posterior, or lateral? Ideally.
Posterior.
Yes?
Posterior.
Posterior is wrong. Anybody else? Anybody else? The answer here is lateral. Okay. The ideal sample for the hormonal studies to be taken from the vagina is from the lateral wall, because most of the times what happens in the anterior and the posterior, there will be admixture of the secretions and all that. So we don't take it from these two walls. We take it from the lateral wall. Okay. From the posterior wall, we take the sample in pap smear. If you remember, when you're taking the pap smear to for the to detect the precancerous lesions in the pap smear, we take the sample from the intracervical canal as well as the ectocervix, and we also take from the posterior vaginal wall. So there you take it from the posterior wall, not for the hormonal studies. Okay, remember this one.
Okay, ma'am.
Next is theoretically gonococcal vaginitis can be seen in puberty, in newborn females, in reproductive age females, or in sex workers.
D.
Theoretically it is, not practically. Anyone?
D.
Why B?
Ma'am,
Yes, you're
it's
right.
lost of vaginal defense.
Sorry, loss of?
Loss of vaginal defense.
Yes. So why there is loss of vaginal defense?
Because concentration of lactobacilli is decreased after
No
10 days.
catch.
No, in
I-
newborn females, the Dodelin bacilli will be there, no? What we read last time. Gonococcal vaginitis means the gonococci has affinity to which kind of epithelium? The reason here is not because of the loss of defense or the loss of Dodelins bacilli or whatever, because the
Due to
Dodelins
ma'am,
bacilli is present.
lining epithelium.
The lining epithelium of the vagina in the newborn females is what type?
Transitional.
Yeah, so the transitional is prone for gonococcal infection, is it not?
Yes, ma'am.
So that is the basis here for this question. So they mean theoretically means at the time of the birth, the epithelium of the vagina is transitional. So it might be more what you call prone for gonococcal infections. Understood? That is the basis behind this question. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Now again, this is again cervix to corpus ratio before puberty. 1:2, 2:1, 1:3, 3:1. Before puberty. It is cervix to corpus, mind you, read it properly. Last time we had a question, corpus to cervix. So you need to be very careful. Cervix to corpus. Before puberty.
B.
2:1, ma'am.
Yeah, 2:1. Correct. Understood? So this is how you can twist the question and ask. So it's very important for you to read the question carefully. Okay. 34 number question. Which ligament carries ovarian artery in lateral wall? Ovarian ligament, suspensory ligament of ovary, broad ligament, or the round ligament? Lateral
Broad.
wall means lateral pelvic wall, which is the structure which is attached from the ovary to the lateral pelvic wall.
Broadly.
Broad ligament.
Broad ligament is wrong answer.
Suspensory ligament of
Suspensory ligament of
It is
ovary.
suspensory ligament of the ovary, or the other name for it, we just learnt, is it not? Which is a
Yes,
structure
ma'am.
which connects the ovary to the lateral pelvic wall, it is? Infundibulopelvic ligament.
Infundibulopelvic.
That's also called
Infundibulopelvis.
suspensory ligament of the ovary.
Ovary.
So the answer here is B. Okay. Now coming to the next question, most common site of ureteric injury during hysterectomy is at pelvic brim, where it is crossed by uterine artery, where it enters the bladder, where it is over the obturator vessels.
Crosses
Is
the
the right
uterine
answer?
artery.
Pelvic brim.
Pelvic brim is the wrong answer.
Cross it is the
When
uterine
it crosses uterine artery.
Yeah, second B option where it crosses the uterine artery is the most common site, because what happens is, as you remember, in the steps of hysterectomy, we first clamp the round ligament, then we clamp the uterine arteries, and the third clamp we do take the Meckenrod's ligaments on the side of the uterus, is it not? Where it
Yes.
is meeting the cervix. So that is the site where even the uterine artery will be crossing over the ureter towards the uterus. Okay, so that is the region where it is vulnerable for injuries in the hysterectomy. So answer, that is B is the right answer, the most common site for injury. Understood?
Yes, ma'am.
We're coming to picture based question here. You can see the picture, right? So you have to identify the structure which is marked as X. Is it ovarian
Round ligament.
ligament,
Round ligament.
ligament,
Round ligament.
Okay, very good. This answer came really quick. So good. Next, I think this is the last question of the session. You have to identify the structure X here marked in the figure. Is it posterior commissure, fossa navicularis, fourchette, or vestibule?
C.
C is the wrong answer. Though the figure is not very clear, actually, even I wasn't happy with this question. But yes, since they have
Posterior
pointed on a
commissure.
space there, it's a space. I would give that hint to you.
Fossa navicularis.
Yeah, the fossa navicularis is the right answer. Okay. So it's just, as we can see here, this space is the fossa navicularis. Posterior commissure is the point where the labia minora would meet. So it would somewhere be here. So this marked point is somewhere here. So it has to be a space. So this is a fossa navicularis. Whereas vestibule means this whole thing, as we discussed earlier. Posterior commissure means where the point, where they meet. Fourchette is where the labia minora meet in front of the anus. This is the fourchette. This is the posterior commissure, and the space here is the fossa navicularis. That is what they have pointed out. So its answer is fossa navicularis. Okay. I think with this we come to the end of today's session. These were the questions what I had compiled. I just want feedback from you people as to how did you feel about today's class? Quickly, in 1 or 2 sentences. Are you all there?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, it's very helpful.
Sorry,
Ma'am, it's very helpful.
it was helpful. Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. Yeah, any other things you would want to raise? Should we continue with the same kind of pattern where I need to explain a little bit of the theory and then go over the questions, or you want me to cover only the MCQs and then discuss the things?
No, ma'am, a bit of theory and then the MCQs.
So this is the pattern you would want me to kind of continue in the future classes
ma'am.
as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so anything else you would want to kind of suggest?
No, ma'am.
No?
No.
No, ma'am.
Should we call it a day? I think we took almost 2 hours for today's session. I hope it was okay.
Yes, ma'am, it was okay.
Yes, ma'am. It's okay.
Okay, so next time maybe we should restrict it to 1.5 hours, or how do you want me to go about?
Yes, ma'am. No problem, ma'am.
Okay, so should we call it a day then? Anything else you want to put up?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll try to cover the next basic topic in obstetrics for the next class. Okay,
Yes.
And then we can schedule, and the intimation will all be sent to you all.
Okay, ma'am.
Right. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much,
Thank you, ma'am.
everyone. We'll
you,
meet
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.